Ancient temples hold a secret language written in stone. This is the story of the architect's codebook, a hidden system of knowledge that turned sacred spaces into living classrooms for master builders across thousands of years. By the end of this journey, you will see every great monument from the Parthenon to Angkor Wat not as random piles of rock, but as carefully designed instruction manuals. We will uncover how a single, hidden measurement could dictate the design of an entire temple, and why master builders guarded these geometric secrets with their lives. How do you think our modern world would look if we could still read this forgotten architectural language? That universal need for repeatable design led to a profound shift in human thought. It was the moment a master builder stopped seeing a structure as one unique object and started seeing it as a system of relationships. The key was a standard unit of measurement, a common language of length that every worker could understand. In Egypt, this was the royal cubit, a precise length often marked on a carved stone rod. But the real breakthrough was the module. A module is simply a fundamental building block, a single, repeated dimension that dictates the proportions of everything else. Think of it like a single Lego brick. You can build a tiny house or a massive castle, but every wall and window will relate back to the size of that one brick. This is what made construction faster and, more importantly, harmonious. The entire structure sang the same geometric song. A perfect early example of this encoded principle is the ancient Egyptian seked. The seked was not a measurement of length, but a ratio, a fixed number that defined the slope of a pyramid's sides. It was a mathematical recipe. If you knew the seked, any team, anywhere, could build a pyramid with the exact same majestic angle. This was no longer just about stacking stones for a tomb. It was about preserving a perfect, divine form in a repeatable formula. This foundational idea that the universe's most complex and beautiful forms could be broken down into simple, teachable ratios became the unshakable bedrock of architectural tradition. But why did this practical tool for builders become so deeply entwined with the spiritual? How did a builder's rulebook become a sacred text? The answer is found in the ancient belief that geometry itself was divine. Karnak Temple in Egypt stands as a silent, stone university. As you walk through its forest of colossal columns, you are not merely moving through a sacred space, you are navigating a masterclass in engineering. The immense pillars are not placed at random. They stand in precise, harmonious intervals, a rhythm in stone that teaches the fundamental principles of load distribution and spatial balance. Each column's position, each measured gap between them, is a practical lesson. The entire complex was a living classroom, and the act of building it was the curriculum. Apprentices did not just hear about the architect's code, they worked with it, their hands carving and placing stones according to the sacred proportions dictated by the master builder. The temple's layout, the exact ratios of its chambers, and even the intricate carvings adorning its walls all served a dual purpose. They were beautiful religious art, yes, but they were also mnemonic devices, physical memory aids that encoded vast knowledge of astronomy, advanced mathematics, and the secrets of structural integrity. This transformed the temple from a static monument into a dynamic, interactive learning environment that functioned for generations. But how could such a complex system of knowledge be so perfectly organized and passed down over centuries without its core principles being lost or distorted? The answer lies in a powerful, organizing principle, the very heart of the architect's codebook, modular design. This single module acted as the architectural DNA for an entire structure, a genetic blueprint replicated in stone. In a Greek temple, the master builder might select the diameter of a column's base as this fundamental unit. From that one measurement, the entire temple sprang to life. The column's soaring height was not a random guess, it was a precise multiple of that base module. The elegant space between each column, the total width of the building, even the size of the individual steps, all were derived from that original number. This created a profound and invisible harmony. Every part of the building was in a clear, mathematical conversation with every other part. The result was a structure that felt intrinsically balanced and beautiful to the human eye, a visual music composed in stone. Centuries later, the Roman architect Vitruvius would formally write down these principles, calling this perfect relationship symmetria. For him, a great temple was not just about sturdy walls, it was about the commensurability of parts, the way every single element related back to the whole through the consistent application of the module. This modular thinking was the ultimate tool for scalability. The same set of proportional rules, the same architectural DNA, could be used to design a tiny roadside shrine or a sprawling temple complex, with the same perfect harmony guaranteed in both. But this foundational module was only the first layer of the codebook. What other principles did master builders layer on top of this geometric skeleton to breathe life, movement, and soul into their stone creations? This silent symphony in stone was orchestrated using harmonic proportions, the second great principle of the architect's codebook. If the foundational module was the building's genetic blueprint, then these proportions were the music it was built to play. Ancient master builders discovered something profound, that certain mathematical relationships felt inherently right to the human eye and spirit. They were not just building structures, they were composing visual music. The most famous of these relationships is the golden ratio, a number approximately equal to 1.618, which appears repeatedly in nature, from the spiral of a nautilus shell to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. But builders also relied on simpler, powerful ratios like 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. These are the same simple intervals that create the most pleasing chords in music. The builders believed that if these ratios created harmony for the ear, they could also create harmony for the eye and even for the soul. A Greek temple's facade, for instance, might have its width to its height in a perfect 3 to 4 ratio, while the space between its columns related to their diameter in a 2 to 3 ratio. The entire building became a kind of frozen music, a chord progression translated into marble and limestone. This was far more than a quest for beauty. It was a deep, spiritual conviction that by building in harmony with these universal, cosmic numbers, the resulting structure would not only be physically stable, but also spiritually resonant. It would be a place where heaven and earth met, a microcosm of a perfectly ordered universe. The architect's codebook, therefore, taught builders how to tune their structures just as a lute maker tunes an instrument. But this raises a crucial question. How did a master builder, working without modern precision tools, ensure that his apprentice could accurately replicate these subtle, invisible ratios on a massive construction site, generation after generation? The answer lies in a simple yet brilliantly effective physical tool. This final layer of the codebook anchored the entire structure to the cosmos itself. The third principle of axis and orientation dictated that a sacred building was not complete until it was in perfect conversation with the heavens. Its placement on the land was as calculated as its proportions. The Great Pyramid of Giza is a staggering example. Its base aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15th of a degree. This was not a lucky guess, it was the result of profound astronomical knowledge. Similarly, the massive stones of Stonehenge form a celestial calendar, framing the sunrise on the summer solstice. For the master builders, the main axis of a temple was a sacred line, a carefully drawn connection between the human realm and the divine. It might point directly at the North Star, a fixed point in the rotating sky, or towards the exact spot on the horizon where the sun would rise on the feast day of the temple's deity. This act of orientation was a critical lesson for every apprentice. It taught that architecture was not just about creating a beautiful box, it was about situating that box within the grand, orderly flow of the universe. By building in alignment with solstices, equinoxes, and star cycles, they encoded essential astronomical knowledge directly into the landscape. Every time a new generation gathered to repair or expand the temple, they were reminded of these celestial rhythms, their very work reinforcing a connection between earth and sky. This cosmic alignment, combined with the foundational module and harmonic proportions, created a multi-sensory educational experience. The building was not just seen, it was felt, with sunlight pouring down the main axis on a specific day, illuminating the inner sanctum in a dramatic display of celestial timing. So we have the three core principles, the module, harmonic proportions, and cosmic orientation, working in concert. But how did this complex three-part system survive the collapse of empires and the dark ages that followed? The Codebook had to go underground. This culture of secrecy was the Codebook's ultimate safeguard. Master builders did not simply pass on measurements, they initiated disciples into a sacred trust. Across the ancient world, from the stonemason guilds of medieval Europe to the closed schools of Indian temple architects, knowledge was protected by powerful bonds of ritual and oath. An apprentice did not just learn geometry, he swore never to reveal it to the uninitiated. These oaths were far more than a quest for exclusivity, they were a sophisticated form of quality control. By wrapping the principles of the module, harmonic proportion, and cosmic alignment in layers of ceremony, the guilds ensured that this powerful knowledge could not be diluted or misused by those who did not understand its profound responsibility. A builder who merely copied a ratio without grasping the spiritual and structural principles behind it was a danger, liable to create a building that was spiritually inert or physically unsound. The initiation rites weeded out the casual and the unworthy, guaranteeing that only the most dedicated and ethically grounded individuals could advance. The construction site itself was a sacred space, a living ritual. The act of laying the foundation stone was not just a technical first step, it was a ceremony that invoked divine blessings for the entire project. The raising of the first column was a moment of high spiritual drama, a physical manifestation of the axis mundi connecting earth to heaven. These ceremonies were not separate from the work, they were the work. They constantly reminded every worker, from the master to the laborer, that they were not merely stacking stones, they were participating in the creation of a cosmic diagram. This ritualized process embedded the Codebook's principles into the very muscle memory of the builders, ensuring the knowledge was lived, not just memorized. But such a strict oral tradition, bound by secrecy, creates a tantalizing puzzle for us today. If this knowledge was so fiercely guarded, passed only from master to apprentice in whispers and rituals, did any of these sacred codes ever escape the confines of memory to be written down for future generations to find? Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is far more than a beautiful sketch of a man in a circle. It is a declaration, a visual key to unlocking the entire architectural codebook of antiquity. In this single, powerful image, Da Vinci captured the core belief of the Roman architect Vitruvius, that the ideal building should mirror the perfect proportions of the human form, the ultimate divine creation. The drawing's overlapping geometry show a man whose height equals his arm span, whose navel sits at the center of a circle, and whose body can be inscribed within both a circle and a square. These were not arbitrary shapes, they were the fundamental geometric patterns that ancient builders used to lay out their temples. For Renaissance masters like Filippo Brunelleschi and Leon Battista Alberti, this human-centered blueprint became a Rosetta Stone. They traveled to Rome, sketchbooks in hand, and used these proportional principles to measure the ruins. They studied the soaring dome of the Parthenon, not just as a marvel of engineering, but as a mathematical puzzle. By applying the Vitruvian ideal, they could reverse engineer its hidden modules. They could deduce that the dome's height was equal to its diameter, creating a perfect sphere of space, and that every element related back to a fundamental unit derived from the human scale. This was how they extracted the living principles from the dead stones, sparking a revolution that gave us the Duomo in Florence and a new wave of classically inspired architecture. The Renaissance was, in essence, a grand and successful mission to read the ancient codebook, yet this raises a profound question. Was this sacred language of proportion, this architect's codebook, a secret held only by the West, or was it a universal human discovery echoed across the globe? Across the world, in the ancient traditions of India, we find a codebook so complete it governed every aspect of creation. The Vastu Shastra is not merely an architectural guide, it is a spiritual and cosmic manual for building in harmony with the universe. At its heart lies the Vastu Shastra mandala, a sacred diagram that is the absolute embodiment of the modular principle. Imagine a perfect square divided into a grid of 64 or 81 smaller squares. This grid is the foundational module, the architectural DNA for an entire temple, palace, or even a home. The legend says a formless cosmic being, the Vastu Shastra, was pinned to the earth and his body aligns with this mandala. Different gods preside over different squares, with the most powerful, Brahma, residing at the very center. From this sacred center, the entire design radiates outward. The temple's walls, its gateways, the inner sanctum, every single element finds its precise and non-negotiable place on this cosmic grid. The principles are all here, as clear as they were in the West, a foundational module, a harmonic layout dictated by the grid, and a strict cosmic orientation, with the main entrance almost always facing the east to greet the rising sun. This is not a coincidence. It is a powerful testament to a shared human intuition, a universal discovery that the most profound order, whether in a Greek temple or a Hindu shrine, could be encoded into a simple, repeatable geometric plan. The temple was a tool for imposing spiritual order on the chaos of the world, and the act of building it was the ultimate lesson in that sacred geometry. But how did these exacting principles of stone and grid translate into the fluid, organic world of wood, in the soaring pagodas of Japan and the intricate halls of China? The seamless logic of the Vastu Shastra mandala finds a stunning parallel in the wooden temples of Japan, where the codebook was written not just in measurement, but in the very grain of the timber. Here, the foundational module was the ken, a standard unit of space, and the smaller jo, a grid based on the size of a tatami mat. This grid dictated the rhythm of the entire structure, from the spacing of pillars to the depth of the eaves. But the true soul of this system lived in the joinery, complex, interlocking wooden joints carved with breathtaking precision were the hidden modules of structural knowledge. Each joint had a name, a specific function, and served as a masterclass in managing immense forces without a single metal nail or bracket. Imagine the intricate puzzle of a pagoda, its tiers swaying gracefully during an earthquake, each joint flexing and absorbing the energy, a dance of physics perfected over centuries. Master carpenters guarded scrolls filled with diagrams of these joints, a literal, though deeply esoteric, codebook passed from one generation to the next. Building a temple was an act of assembling a giant, three-dimensional lesson in craftsmanship, where every interlocking piece taught the principles of balance, tension, and resilience. This profound focus on the material itself reveals a different dimension of the code, one that listened to the nature of wood and worked in harmony with its strengths. The Gothic cathedral was a stone skeleton designed to defy gravity itself. Its master builders faced an impossible challenge: to construct walls of breathtaking height that were mostly empty space, filled with colossal windows. Their solution was a new geometric language, written in the dynamic thrust of arches and the delicate balance of counterforces. The foundational module here was not a single measurement, but a shape, the simple square. On the tracing floors where masons laid out their full-scale plans, they used a compass and a straightedge to multiply this square into a grid. From that grid, they could generate the complex geometry of a ribbed vault or the perfect pointed arch. Every flying buttress, that stone arm reaching out to cradle the wall, was placed according to a precise angle calculated from this system. The entire cathedral was a three-dimensional diagram of its own structural logic, a permanent lesson in resolving forces. And then there was the light. The stained glass windows were more than just illustrations for those who could not read. They were gigantic, luminous blueprints of sacred geometry. The intricate stone tracery that held the glass in place formed rose windows and lancets based on the very same squares, circles, and triangles used to design the building's skeleton. A worshipper looking up at the radiant rose window of Notre Dame was, without even knowing it, gazing directly at the architect's core geometric code. The cathedral was a complete educational system, teaching theology through images and engineering through form, all unified by a single, invisible mathematical order. This was the Codebook's brilliant adaptation to a new age, using stone and light to preserve knowledge. Yet this very success sowed the seeds for the tradition's eventual decline. What happens to a living, oral code when the world begins to trust the printed page over the master's whispered secret? The printing press shattered the guild's ancient monopoly on knowledge. For centuries, the architect's codebook had been a living tradition, passed from master to apprentice through whispered secrets and hands-on ritual. But when the first printed architectural treatises rolled off the presses in the 15th century, everything changed. Suddenly, the core principles of proportion, module, and order were no longer locked away in memory. They were bound in leather and available to any literate person with a coin to purchase a book. Men like Leon Battista Alberti, Andrea Palladio, and Sebastiano Serlio became best-selling authors, their detailed diagrams and rules spreading the ideals of classical architecture across Europe. This was a glorious democratization of design, a fire hose of information that quenched a thirst for beauty and order. Yet this very accessibility carried a hidden cost. The deep, intuitive understanding forged over years of apprenticeship, the feel of the stone and the rhythm of the sacred construction site, could not be printed on a page. A reader in France could now perfectly copy the proportions of a Palladian villa without ever understanding the spiritual and structural why behind them. The code was being separated from its context. The master builder, who had once been both designer and craftsman, began to split into two distinct roles. On one side stood the architect, the man with the book, the theorist. On the other stood the builder, the man who executed the plans. This division marked a profound shift in our relationship with the built world. The living codebook, once sung by the stones themselves, was now silent text on a page. It makes you wonder, did we gain clarity at the expense of wisdom? This paradox leads us directly to our own time, forcing us to ask what remains of this ancient language in the steel and glass of our modern cities. The clean lines of a modernist skyscraper stand in stark contrast to the carved stone of a Gothic cathedral. This was not an evolution of the old codebook, it was a conscious, radical break. The Industrial Revolution did not just give us new materials like steel and concrete, it gave us a new philosophy. The ancient belief that a building should mirror the cosmos was replaced by the idea that it should serve a function as efficiently as a machine. Architects like Le Corbusier became the prophets of this new age, famously declaring that a house was a machine for living in. This was a powerful, liberating idea. It swept away centuries of historical ornament and what was seen as outdated, superstitious proportion. The goal was no longer to encode cosmic harmony, but to solve the practical problems of shelter, light, and air for the masses. The universal module was no longer derived from the human body or a sacred grid. It was dictated by the dimensions of a standard steel beam or the prefabricated concrete panel. We gained an unprecedented ability to build fast, high, and cheap. Entire cities of glass and steel rose from the ground, monuments to a new god, efficiency. But this incredible technological triumph came with a hidden cost. In stripping away the ornament, we often stripped away the soul. The subtle, invisible harmonies that made an ancient temple feel intrinsically balanced and human were set aside. Many of these new environments, for all their functional brilliance, can feel alienating and cold. We created vast plazas of raw concrete that feel windswept and impersonal. We built towering glass boxes that reflect the sky but offer no warmth to the human scale. We gained the power to house millions, but we risked losing the timeless language that made a building feel like a home for the human spirit. So where does that leave us today, surrounded by the legacy of this great schism? Is it possible to rediscover that lost architectural language, to weave its ancient wisdom into the fabric of our modern world? Even the high priest of modernism felt the pull of that ancient harmony. Decades after declaring the house a machine, Le Corbusier unveiled his own attempt at a universal codebook, a system he called the Modular. It was a startling admission from a man who had championed pure function. The Modular was a stylized human figure, standing with one arm raised, and from this form, Le Corbusier derived a sequence of measurements based on the golden ratio. He believed this could be the missing link, a way to reintroduce human scale and timeless mathematical beauty into the cold logic of the industrial world. Here was a direct echo of the Vitruvian man, a renewed conviction that the human body itself was the ultimate module. He applied this system to his later buildings, like the Unité de Habitation in Marseille, using the modular's proportions to determine the height of ceilings, the placement of windows, and the layout of apartments. The dream was to make a massive concrete apartment block feel as naturally ordered as a Greek temple. Yet the Modular never achieved the universal adoption he hoped for. It was often seen as overly complex, a personal obsession rather than a practical standard, but its true significance lies not in its success, but in its very existence. Le Corbusier's lonely quest is powerful proof that the human spirit instinctively rebels against a world built on pure utility. It shows a deep, persistent craving for an underlying order, a module that connects our creations not just to our bodies, but to a sense of universal beauty. This 20th century attempt to bridge ancient wisdom and modern necessity forces a crucial question for our own time. If a giant of modernism felt this need so acutely, what might we be missing in our own steel and glass landscapes? Our modern architectural codebook is written in the silent language of ones and zeros. The foundational module has transformed from a carved stone block into a line of code, a variable in a digital design program. This is the realm of parametric design, where an architect no longer draws a single fixed form, but instead defines a set of rules and relationships. Imagine setting a parameter that the building's skin must respond to the sun's path, with its thousands of unique panels adjusting their angle and opacity to maximize shade and light. The algorithm then generates millions of potential variations, all faithful to that original, invisible code. This is a new kind of encoded architecture, where the governing principles are mathematical and environmental, yet the outcome is a physical structure of breathtaking complexity. The ancient master builder's module was a fixed length, but the parametric module is a dynamic rule, a living relationship that can scale and adapt in ways the old builders could only dream of. This digital framework finds its ultimate expression in building information modeling, or BIM. A BIM model is far more than a three-dimensional drawing. It is a vast, intelligent database. Every beam, window, and pipe is not just a shape, it is an object packed with data, its own digital DNA. This system knows the material it represents, its cost, its structural capacity, and its place in the construction sequence. It is the modern equivalent of the Vastu Shastra mandala, a comprehensive digital grid that governs the entire life of a building, from the first sketch to its eventual demolition. The lesson of scalability and repeatability that the Egyptians mastered with the seked is now amplified to a global scale, with the same digital module able to generate a custom home or coordinate a 1,000-story megastructure. We are now encoding not just proportions for beauty, but data for survival, information about energy performance, carbon footprint, and structural resilience against earthquakes and storms. The sacred temple, with its alignment to the stars, has been replaced by the intelligent digital model, aligned with the hard realities of a changing planet. Yet this incredible power forces a profound question upon us. The ancient codebook was infused with a spiritual purpose, a desire to create harmony between humanity, our buildings, and the cosmos. Our new digital codebook is driven by efficiency, sustainability, and data. How can we write our algorithms to include the timeless wisdom of the old, to build structures that are not just smart but also soulful? This is the great design challenge of our age, to weave human meaning into the logic of the machine. The most ancient codebook of all is written not in stone, but in the living world around us. Long before the first temple was ever conceived, nature had already perfected its own library of flawless designs. Look at the spiral of a nautilus shell, its growth perfectly following the Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical series where each number is the sum of the two before it. This is not a random pattern, it is nature's own module, a fundamental building block for efficient and beautiful form. Observe the way a tree branches, its limbs splitting in a fractal pattern that maximizes sunlight exposure and structural stability with an absolute minimum of material. Or consider the humble honeycomb. Its hexagonal cells a masterclass in using the least amount of wax to create the greatest possible strength and storage space. These are not just curiosities, they are blueprints for a better way to build. A powerful new movement in architecture, known as biomimicry, is now consciously turning to these natural blueprints. The goal is to emulate nature's time-tested patterns and strategies. This is a direct and profound parallel to the ancient master builders who meticulously observed the cosmic order of the stars and the mathematical harmony they believed governed the universe. Just as they sought to align their temples with celestial rhythms, biomimetic architects are now aligning their buildings with biological logic. They are asking a simple yet revolutionary question. How would nature design a building? The answer is leading to structures that are inherently sustainable, resilient, and deeply beautiful. The Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe is a stunning example. Instead of installing a massively expensive and energy-guzzling air conditioning system, its designers studied the termite mound. termites maintain a constant, cool temperature inside their mounds by ingeniously opening and closing vents throughout the day. The Eastgate Center uses this same passive cooling principle, its chimneys drawing in cool night air and venting warm air during the day, all without conventional air conditioning. It uses 90% less energy than a similarly sized conventional building. This is not just smart engineering, it is the rediscovery of a principle that was always there, hidden in plain sight. It is the same principle of working with the environment, rather than against it, that guided the orientation of ancient temples to harness the sun and wind. We are now using advanced science and computational power to decode the very same ecological wisdom that was once intuitively understood. This represents a remarkable full-circle moment in our architectural story. The quest that began with observing the stars and the human body is now leading us to the spider's web and the lotus leaf. The ultimate goal is no longer just to build a machine for living, but to create a building that breathes, adapts, and thrives as a living part of its ecosystem, just as a forest does. This new chapter in our codebook feels less like an invention and more like a homecoming. The Parthenon stands on its Athenian hill not as a monument to rigid geometry, but as a testament to the codebook's most sophisticated lesson, knowing when to break the rules to serve a higher truth. Its perfection is a beautiful deception, a calculated masterpiece of illusion. The architects Ictinos and Callicrates employed a rigorous module, likely derived from the diameter of the columns, to dictate every proportion. But they faced a profound problem. A structure built with perfectly straight lines and right angles would appear to sag and distort to the human eye when viewed from a distance against the bright sky. Their brilliant solution was a series of secret adjustments, corrections passed not in texts but through the oral tradition of the master builder. Look closely at the columns. They do not stand arrow straight. Each one swells almost imperceptibly in the middle, a subtle bulge called entosses, which prevents them from appearing pinched and weak. Furthermore, the columns are not set perfectly vertical. They all tilt slightly inward, and if you were to extend their lines upward, they would meet almost 2.5 kilometers high in the sky. Even the massive platform on which they stand, the stylobate, is not flat. It curves gently upward in the center, so that rainwater would run off and, more importantly, so the building would not seem to slump under its own weight. These were not construction errors. They were premeditated and precise refinements, a secret language of curves and angles designed to counter optical illusions. The Parthenon teaches us that the true goal of the codebook was not mathematical purity for its own sake, but the creation of an ideal visual and emotional experience. It was about understanding the quirks of human perception and making intelligent, invisible adjustments to achieve perceived perfection. The building is a conversation between absolute rule and living intuition, a masterclass in how hidden principles were applied to breathe life and harmony into cold stone. Angkor Wat rises from the Cambodian jungle as a perfect stone universe. This sprawling temple complex is the architect's codebook written on a colossal, breathtaking scale. It was designed to be nothing less than a microcosm of the Hindu cosmos, a physical model of divine order for all to walk through and learn from. Its 5 iconic central towers are not just beautiful spires, they represent the sacred peaks of Mount Meru, the mythical axis of the world. The immense rectangular moat surrounding the temple is not merely a defensive barrier, it is the cosmic ocean encircling the universe itself. Every single element, from the grandest bridge to the smallest carved bas-relief, was placed according to a sacred diagram, a master plan that encoded a complete worldview. The builders of Angkor Wat were not just stacking sandstone blocks, they were assembling a cosmic diagram, a 3-dimensional textbook of theology and astronomy. The entire layout was a profound lesson in how to build a kingdom that mirrored the harmony of the heavens. This ambition required more than just symbolic shapes. It demanded a perfect, measurable alignment with the cosmos itself. The temple's primary axis is oriented with such precision that on the morning of the spring equinox, an observer standing at the western entrance gate witnesses the sun rise in perfect alignment directly over the central tower. This was no accident. It was a calculated, celestial event engineered in stone, a yearly reaffirmation of the temple's role as a bridge between the earthly and the divine realms. The proportions of the galleries, the dimensions of the enclosures, and the rhythmic spacing of the towers all follow harmonic ratios that were believed to reflect the music of the spheres. To walk the long causeway into Angkor Wat is to traverse from the outer chaos of the world into a realm of perfect, preordained order. Building this complex was the ultimate act of world building, a lesson taught over generations, where every carved devota and every measured step reinforced a vision of a kingdom in sacred harmony with the universe. The stones of Angkor Wat whisper that true architecture is not just about creating space, but about constructing meaning, aligning a civilization's heart with the turning of the stars. A young apprentice's education began not with a lecture, but with the sweeping of stone dust. For the first year, he might do nothing more than fetch water, sharpen tools, and observe the sacred rhythm of the worksite. This seemingly menial labor was the first, crucial layer of his training. He was absorbing the culture, the unspoken language of the craft, and the weight of the tradition he hoped to join. His ears became tuned to the specific ring of a well-struck chisel. His eyes learned to judge the quality of stone by its color and grain, and his hands grew accustomed to the heft of the tools that would one day become extensions of his own will. Only after proving his patience and dedication would he be trusted to handle materials, perhaps mixing mortar to the exact right consistency, or roughing out a block of stone under a master's watchful eye. This slow, deliberate immersion was a filter designed to separate the truly committed from the merely curious. It ensured that the first principles of the code were absorbed through the pores long before they were ever explained as abstract rules. The foundational module was not a number on a page. It was a length his own body learned to feel as he helped stretch a cord between two marking pins. Harmonic proportion was not a mathematical formula. It was the visual balance he saw the master achieve when stepping back to squint at a nearly finished column. Every task, no matter how simple, was a lesson in disguise. Preparing a batch of lime mortar taught him about chemical transformation and the patience required for a proper cure, a metaphor for the slow, steady work of mastering the craft itself. He learned by watching the master's hands, by listening to the old chants that held mnemonic rhymes for complex geometric sequences, and by absorbing the stories of past failures and triumphs told over the evening fire. This was an education that engaged the hands, the eyes, and the mind simultaneously, forging an unbreakable, intuitive bond between the builder and the code. The knowledge did not simply reside in his memory. It lived in the muscles of his arms and the judgment of his gaze. How could a modern classroom, with its focus on theory and screens, ever hope to replicate this profound, physical form of understanding? Every carved number and chosen shape was a deliberate key to a deeper memory. This symbolic layer of the codebook transformed abstract geometry into a living philosophy that a builder could carry in his mind long after he left the tracing floor. The number 4 was never just a quantity. It was the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 seasons, the 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water. When a master builder laid out a temple on a square plan, he was not just creating a stable foundation. He was symbolically establishing a miniature ordered world, a square of stability set against the chaos of nature. The circle, in perfect contrast, represented the heavens, the divine, and the eternal cycle of the sun and stars. Placing a circular dome upon a square base was the ultimate architectural act, a symbolic union of heaven and earth that every worker understood. Even a seemingly simple decorative motif, like a 5-petaled flower carved into a capital, could be a hidden lesson. The spacing of those petals often perfectly encoded the golden ratio, a constant reminder of the harmonic proportion that should govern the entire structure. These symbols were the hooks on which vast technical knowledge was hung. A complex proportional sequence for a vaulted ceiling was much easier to remember if it was also a story about the journey of the sun. The construction site became a landscape of meaning, where setting a stone was not just a physical act, but a symbolic one, aligning the building with the fundamental principles of the cosmos. This enriched the education of every apprentice, teaching him that his craft was not merely a trade, but a sacred language for speaking with the universe itself. This silent education shaped the mind of every citizen who passed through the city's heart. The grand temples and stoas lining the agora in Athens were not just beautiful backdrops for daily life, they were active instructors in stone. Their repeated columns, standing in perfect, rhythmic intervals, subconsciously taught the eye to expect order and balance. The clean, harmonic lines of a treasury building communicated the power of reason and the ideal of a society governed by law, not chaos. A person did not need to be a mason to feel this effect. Simply by moving through these spaces day after day, the citizen absorbed a core cultural value that human affairs could and should be arranged with the same elegant precision as these structures. The city itself became a vast, open-air classroom where the curriculum was beauty and the lessons were learned through the senses. This was the Codebook's brilliant public function, to elevate the collective consciousness by making supreme order a normal, expected part of the human environment. It was a form of psychological and civic training, reinforcing the idea that the individual was part of a larger, harmonious whole. The same principle echoed in the Roman Forum, where the triumphant arch used precise modular proportions to communicate imperial power and stability, and in the great plazas of Mesoamerican cities, where the monumental pyramids aligned to the cosmos taught a populace their sacred place in the universe. The architecture was a constant, silent sermon on the values the culture held most dear. But if these public stones were the teachers, who then were the ultimate authors of this pervasive, silent curriculum? Yet for every grand theory, a shadow of healthy skepticism remains. Some historians and archaeologists push back, arguing that we are often seeing patterns we desperately want to see. They suggest that when we overlay the golden ratio onto the Parthenon, we might be engaging in a kind of intellectual Rorschach test, projecting our own modern fascination with mathematical mysticism onto builders who are primarily concerned with practical stability and the simple, efficient use of materials. These critics point to the reality of the ancient construction site, where tolerances were often far looser than our digital models suggest. A block might be cut a hand's breadth too short, and the builders would simply pack the gap with rubble and mortar, adapting on the fly. They ask a crucial question: did Vitruvius describe a universal, living practice, or was he writing down an idealized theory, a philosophical dream of how buildings should be made, rather than a strict record of how they always were made? This perspective forces us to confront a romanticized vision of the past. It is a necessary corrective, a reminder that ancient builders were pragmatic problem solvers, not just mystic geometers. The sound of their hammers was often more about meeting a deadline than encoding cosmic truth. So where does this leave the architect's codebook? The most compelling answer is not an all-or-nothing choice, but a layered synthesis. At its foundation lies a core of brutally practical, encoded knowledge, the simple module for speed, the seked for a stable slope, the grid for orderly layout. This was the essential, reproducible toolkit. Wrapped around this practical core was a thick layer of cultural and spiritual symbolism. The same grid that ensured a wall was straight could also represent the cosmic order. The same proportion that made a building strong could be celebrated as a divine harmony. The two reinforced each other. The symbolism gave the practical work a higher meaning, and the successful, sturdy building proved the power of the symbolic rules. Finally, in later ages, thinkers like the Renaissance humanists added a third layer, one of intellectual interpretation. They looked at the ruins and saw in their proportions a philosophical system, a lost wisdom they sought to recover and document. The truth of the Codebook lies in the interplay of all three: the hand of the mason, the soul of the priest, and the mind of the scholar, all speaking through the same stones. This nuanced view does not diminish the Codebook. It enriches it, transforming it from a mythical secret into a profound dialogue between human necessity, spiritual yearning, and intellectual curiosity. And if this code was indeed a living, evolving conversation, what final, silent message did it leave for us, carved into the world's most enduring monuments? The ancient Codebook's most vital lesson is one we are now scrambling to remember. In a world grappling with climate change and resource depletion, the old principles of environmental harmony are no longer just philosophical ideals, they are practical necessities for survival. The temples and structures of the past were inherently sustainable because their very existence depended on a deep, intelligent conversation with their local environment. Their orientation was not merely symbolic. It was a functional strategy for passive solar heating, capturing the low winter sun for warmth while using deep eaves or columned porticos to create shade from the high, scorching summer sun. Their designs harnessed natural ventilation, with strategically placed openings creating a chimney effect that drew cool air through the building and flushed out hot air, long before the invention of the electric fan. They were built with local materials, stone quarried from nearby hills, timber harvested from surrounding forests, because transporting materials across vast distances was an unimaginable luxury. This was not a separate discipline called green building. It was simply how you built anything that was meant to last. We are now using advanced computer simulations to rediscover these passive design strategies that were encoded into the very fabric of historical structures. The massive thermal mass of stone walls, which slowly absorb heat during the day and release it at night, stabilizing indoor temperatures, is a principle we are now applying in modern rammed earth and concrete construction. The clever water catchment systems of ancient Roman cities, which channeled rainwater into vast cisterns, are the direct ancestors of the grey-water recycling systems we are installing today. By looking back at the Codebook, we find a sourcebook of elegant, low-energy solutions to our most pressing crises. This ancient wisdom teaches us that true resilience does not come from overpowering nature with more technology and energy, but from intelligently aligning our designs with its immutable laws. The ultimate goal of the sustainable architect today is the same as the master builder of old: to create a shelter that is not just a place for people, but a harmonious and enduring part of the living landscape. Our most powerful tools for reading this ancient code are now beams of light and algorithms. Archaeologists and architects are deploying three-dimensional laser scanners that paint ancient structures with millions of precise data points, capturing every subtle curve and weathered angle. This process, known as LiDAR, creates a breathtakingly accurate digital twin, a ghost of the original building living inside a computer. We can now measure the Parthenon's intentional bulge, its intosses, down to a fraction of a millimeter, confirming the exact mathematical formula the Greeks used to create their optical illusions. Another technique, photogrammetry, uses thousands of overlapping photographs to build a similarly precise model, revealing tool marks and assembly lines invisible to the naked eye. These are not just digital recreations, they are forensic tools. Engineers can now run simulations on these digital twins, applying virtual forces of wind and earthquake to a Gothic cathedral's vault to see exactly how its flying buttresses channel and dissipate stress. This is how we are digitally disassembling these masterpieces, stone by virtual stone, to understand the decision-making process of the master builder. We can test the load-bearing capacity of a specific joint in a Japanese pagoda, or calculate the acoustic properties of an ancient Greek theater. This technological archaeology is moving us from speculation into the realm of empirical evidence. For generations, the idea of a universal module was a compelling theory, a pattern seen by the human eye. Now, by analyzing the point cloud data from a scanned Roman temple, we can run algorithms to search for a fundamental unit of measurement. The computer can test every possible dimension, from the column diameter to the floor tile size, and statistically prove which one was the most likely foundational module. It is one thing to suggest a building follows the golden ratio. It is another to demonstrate it mathematically across every facade and interior space with cold, hard data. This is not just confirming the existence of the codebook, it is allowing us to read its most faded passages. We are gaining the ability to see through the eyes of Ictinos at the Parthenon or the unnamed master of Chartres Cathedral, understanding not just what they built, but the brilliant underlying logic of why they built it that way. The stones are finally giving up their silent secrets, and the story they tell is more mathematically sophisticated than we ever dared to dream. Our brains are hardwired to find comfort in a predictable pattern. This deep psychological need is the true bedrock upon which every stone of the architect's codebook was laid. We instinctively recoil from chaos and are drawn toward balance, a preference etched into our very biology. Consider the calm you feel watching a perfectly symmetrical face or listening to a harmonious chord in music. That same sense of rightness washes over us when we stand in a space built with invisible geometric order. These structures feel profoundly correct because they resonate with the internal order of our own bodies, with the bilateral symmetry of our faces and the rhythmic beat of our hearts. The ancient codebook was a genius translation service. It took the vast, intimidating, and abstract principles of the cosmos, the movements of stars and the logic of mathematics, and rendered them into a form we could not just see but inhabit. We could walk through a temple laid out as a perfect square, representing the ordered world, and stand beneath a dome representing the heavens, physically experiencing the connection between the two. This provided something primal, a profound sense of place and belonging within a meaningful universe. The building became a mediator between our small, individual lives and the grand, cosmic whole. This is why a Greek temple or a Gothic cathedral can stir emotion in a modern visitor who knows nothing of modules or sacred ratios. The stones are speaking directly to a deep, subconscious part of us, reminding us of a universal harmony we all intuitively crave. The codebook's ultimate secret was not a number, but an understanding of the human soul itself. From the cosmic grids of the Vastu Shastra to the dynamic algorithms of parametric design, our journey reveals a single, unbroken human quest. We have always sought to capture the wisdom of building and embed it into the world itself, creating a living legacy that could outlast any empire or library. The true genius of the architect's codebook was its method, turning the temple into both the curriculum and the classroom, a permanent instructor carved from stone. This was knowledge you could walk through, touch, and feel resonating in the very air around you. It reminds us that the most profound and lasting lessons are rarely confined to pages, but are instead woven into the fabric of our environment, waiting for observant eyes to uncover their patterns. As we stand at the crossroads of our own future, tasked with creating cities that are both sustainable and soulful, our most valuable blueprint may not be in a new software update, but in the silent, patient language of the ancients. The code was never truly lost, only forgotten, and its principles are etched into every harmonious line of every enduring monument. They are waiting for a new generation of builders, architects, and dreamers to learn their language. If this exploration has shifted how you see the cathedrals, temples, and even the streets of your own city, we would love to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments and join us as we continue to unravel history's deepest mysteries.